Hello and welcome. He trained as a psychologist and a physician, but made a name for himself as the father of lateral thinking, a concept he pioneered. His dozens of best-selling books have been translated into close to 40 languages, and he travels the world consulting for governments and big business. This week on One-on-One, meet one of the world's greatest creative thinkers, Edward de Bono. We may need to solve problems by not removing the cause, but by designing the way forward, even if the cause remains in place. It's lines like these that have made Edward de Bono such a respected problem solver. Born in Malta, with degrees from the top universities in the world, this medical man with a radically different approach became a prolific writer on the subject of thinking, including bestsellers such as The Mechanism of the Mind in 1969 and 6 Thinking Hats in 1985. His ability to problem-solve a wide range of issues, usually through lateral thinking, has made him something of a guru for top management across the world who seek his advice. Even though Dr. de Bono jokes about his age, being in his 70s, he still spends most of his time thinking and teaching people how to think. It's an honor to talk to you, have some creative thinking time with you, so to speak. And you've spent 3 decades essentially teaching people how to think.
Yes.
What has been the biggest challenge in trying to get people to come around to your point of view?
Well, I've spent 3 decades, actually it's 4 decades now.
4 decades now, yeah.
And yet, when you think of it, we haven't done much, we haven't done anything about thinking for 2,400 years, since the ancient Greek gang of 3, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle. So 40 years compared to 2,400 is not much. So the main difficulty is people don't know that thinking is a skill which can be taught or improved. It's more innocence than resistance, more than people say, no, it can't be done, or I don't like what you're doing. Simply getting the word around. There are hundreds of thousands, about 200,000 schools, whole countries like Venezuela, where by law my teaching is used in every school and so on and so on. But it's a long process.
But the world, if we look at it now, is more interconnected through faster global travel, through satellite television, internet. One would assume that there would be a better understanding of different ways of thinking.
No, because for the very reasons you mentioned, people say we've got so much information, we don't need to think. It's rather like the danger of giving computers to youngsters in school. They start to believe you don't have to think, all you've got to do is search and you'll find the answer. So the increases in technology have greatly improved our information, but have not made obvious the need for thinking.
I know you're a big proponent of active thinking, that is not being just reactive.
Well, also the difference is between description and design. Our culture is very good at description, analysis, analyze this, find the standard parts, give the standard answer. But the operational side of thinking, how you do things, how you make things happen, how you design value, we've been very poor at.
Why is that?
Because our thing's based on the old traditions of the scholars, and the scholars were there to analyze. I was in Bangkok at the World University President's Summit. I think there were 2,500 presidents of universities around the world. And I was giving the major speech, and I said universities are out of date. Because universities were to bring the wisdom of the past and make it available in the present. I said, now with the digital age, you can get all the information you want. Universities should be teaching skills, thinking skills, people skills, management skills, operational skills.
When it comes to the kind of countries you travel to now, because you're going all over the world.
Yes, yes.
I think most of you're pretty much every week on an aeroplane, from what I gather.
Just about.
How are you finding cultural adjustments to your concepts?
Well, my concepts are used from Yukon to Australia, from Korea to South Africa. No problems at all. I mean, in Japan, the big buyers of my books like my work. In China, I was there recently. The government is trying my work in schools in 5 provinces, if they like the idea. They think of putting it into 4 million schools and so on. India has asked me to start with 55,000 schools. So a lot of the countries which used to be regarded as third world or emerging actually are making much more progress because they're less complacent. The other countries say, oh no, we know everything. You can't improve it. We've got philosophers, we know all about thinking, and they're getting left behind.
Take me through what brought you to where you are, your childhood. You were born in Malta.
I was born in Malta, which is the oldest civilization in the world, officially. The Egyptian pyramids for us are modern architecture. And born there, my family is a very medical family. My father's professor of medicine, my uncle professor of surgery, my other uncle professor of ear, nose and throat. So very medical family. So I qualified as a medical doctor, went as a Rhodes Scholar to Oxford, and did psychology. But then back in medical research, I was working with the complicated systems, glands, kidney, circulation, respiration, developed ideas on self-organizing systems, applied that to the neural networks in the brain, and said, if the brain works like this, what's it good at? What's it not good at? It's good at making patterns. Now, patterns are systems always asymmetric. The route from A to B is not the same as the route from B to A. So I said, if that's the case, that explains creativity and humor. And what can we do about it? So that was the basis for the specific tools of lateral thinking. So for the first time in human history, ways of thinking are related to the way the brain works, not just related to words, which is what philosophers have been doing.
What do you think, I mean, apart from the medical background that your family, your uncles, your father and your uncles imparted to you, what, I mean, with at least the interest, what do you think they gave you in terms of skills, and what do you think you got from them in terms of values?
Well, I think father's a medicine, mother was a journalist and sometimes a political activist and got votes for women in Malta at the time, things like that. So I think partly the courage to do things. For instance, I wrote a book once on why I want to be king of Australia. And all my friends said, oh, that's terrible, that's presumptuous, and they wouldn't like it. They loved it. And I had discussions with the Prime Minister, John Howard. He said, good idea. He said, next time we have a referendum, we'll have three choices, Queen of England, Republic, de Bono for king. I'd probably get the most votes, too.
Ironically, your father was one who discouraged you from writing at one stage.
Yes, he did. He said, you're absolutely right. He said, I forget the words he used, but it was discouraging. He said, you've got a good career in medicine, stick to medicine, something like that.
And I know you always say that what you got from your mother was being cheeky.
Yes, the courage. It's like the story of why I want to be king of Australia. Yes, exactly right. Yes.
What was it, I mean, taking me back through those childhood memories, those early days, you're interacting with your parents. Yes. What was it you remember most about that time?
I don't remember very much. I used to sit next to my father at meals, and it was pretty silent, so that wasn't a very stimulating setting. So we had a nanny, a nurse, who'd been with the family for 60 years and so on. And I was interacting with my brother, I've got an elder brother, younger brother, and so on and so on. But I was always interested in things, inventing things, making things.
Of course, Malta, and I would assume that, you know, with that sort of strict British kind of environment, and I was born in a British colony myself, would have had a certain kind of air, a certain kind of atmosphere, which perhaps has disappeared nowadays.
No, I mean, this was, when I was young, was during the war, and there were more bombs dropped on Malta in 1 month than in the whole of England, in the whole of the Battle of Britain. It is the most heavily bombed place on earth. But since all the houses were built of stone, there was no fire. Unless you got a direct hit, no problem. And when we were digging the air raid shelter in the back garden, we came across the tomb of a noble Roman lady. Lots of gold jewelry and so on. It was all now in the museum, just in the back garden.
Amazing. And in terms of your interaction with your brothers, your siblings, did you find that you had a similar way of thinking? I mean, you were something of a child genius.
I used to do pretty well, yes. And at school I was always first in every subject. In fact, I jumped classes twice. Instead of going to the class above me, I went to one above that twice.
Which made you the youngest in the class.
Yes, I was.
Which would have had its own problems.
Yes, it would. It would, in a sense. Yes, I couldn't beat anyone up. But,
but they could, because you got the.
No, I always made friends with the big bully of the firm, and we got on fine, and no one dared touch me.
And I think you were the only boy who had a key to the chemistry lab.
Yes,
in your own
that's
team.
right. That's right.
They trusted you.
Yes. And I can't remember what I did, but I didn't make stink bombs or anything.
But with the relationship you had with your siblings, did you find that it was a competitive environment as a young man?
No, not really, no. No, I mean, we each went our own way, and I was really the middle, and there's a sister and brother above me and two brothers below, and the middle child always goes his own way. In fact, there is a proverb in Maltese, which is my favorite proverb, and in Maltese it's mutu mutu runa fulbutu, which means quietly, quietly with your horns in your pocket. In other words, you don't go charging around. Very quietly, you go about what you're doing, and no one notices, and you do it.
Was it for you a happy time? You went through the war, as you say, and was it a happy time for you?
Yes, I think so. And there wasn't much food. I mean, I wasn't starving, but there wasn't much food, yes.
How was the adjustment then? You obviously did so well with schooling. You went as Rhodes Scholar to Oxford.
Yes.
I mean, you've been to more or less all the top institutions, from Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard.
Yes, I've been trying to educate them all, yes.
Yes. I'm sure they appreciate that.
Yes.
So the lateral thinking concept came up, as you say, I think, from the working with the self...
Working with self-organizing systems in 1967 was my first book. And interestingly, I was recently in India, and this fellow told me, he said, you know, one time I was coming to Europe as a student and my plane was diverted to Paris, and I went to the bookshop at the airport, picked up your first book, Use of Lateral Thinking. He said, I kept it in my briefcase for 30 years. He said, at that time I had $3 in my pocket. Now he said, I've got $1.6 billion in my pocket, and he said, it's 80% due to your book.
Oh. Well, you also had, there were some interesting applications I read on how lateral thinking, for example, after the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles.
Yes. Well, when Peter Ueberroth was interviewed in the Washington Post, they said, how did you do it all? It's all about lateral thinking, which he learned in 1975 from a 90-minute talk I'd given to the Young Presidents Organization in Boca Raton.
Is there anything that lateral thinking can't be applied to?
No, lateral thinking it merely means that we're using the patterns established in the brain, but instead of going along the main path, we're able to access the side path. That's why it's called lateral.
But in the sense of, I mean, you know, obviously, initially your application was in a certain area, then business became a big proponent of it.
I wrote my first book, which is virtually no mention of business. Business was the part of society which became the most interested, because in business you have to think. There's a bottom line. There's a reality test. In politics, in the academic world, all you've got to do is prove you're right, prove the other fellow's wrong. There's no reality test.
Did you find that, you know, as you were introducing the concept of lateral thinking, I mean, you were still a relatively young man, you were going through you know, a lot of adjustments. Did you find that it changed the way you applied, I mean, were you able to easily apply it to what you did as well?
Well, I didn't necessarily apply it to all my problems, you know, how to choose a girlfriend or not. Although I was in Pakistan recently, not recently, but a year ago, and there's this woman who's teaching my work in school, and she said there were 4 men who wanted to marry her, and she used my thinking techniques to pick the one.
Did she get it right?
I hope she's happy. That I don't know. That I don't know.
Well, Dr. Bono, we're going to take a very short break here and then return in just a moment. One-on-One, we'll be right back in just a moment.